What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up Monday, August 26th. Anthony, that offense that you were touting on Friday morning after that electric Braves series broke through in Kansas City this weekend. Look at them. Look at them with a nice
Unreal, right?
finish. Fire Kevin Long.
Well, Bob, look, and it's the thing of it is, and this is why we laugh at this sport all the time, right? Just because, just when you think you know what's going to happen or what the trend is in for a team in this sport, it just flips on its ear that quickly. It happens all the time, all across the league. And look, I'm not going to sit here and be like, "See, I told you so," because I'm also the kind of person who doesn't look at two games where the offense is great and says all is well with the world.
Yeah.
I try to be the pragmatist and be the one that plays it as evenly down the middle and level headed as I can. So I'm not going to sit here and say that was great, but boy, was it needed, right? Boy, was it needed for that team to have that kind of offensive output, 45 hits in 3 games. The first time since 2008 that they scored 22 runs and 34 hits in back-to-back games. That's something, right? That's a little bit more than even what you expect from this offense.
Yeah, and they did it against 2 starting pitchers on Saturday and Sunday who have had good seasons for the Royals. I mean, we talked about it on Monday going into this. They were the only team in the American League that had won at least 40 games at home this season. They threw 3 pitchers this weekend, all of whom had better ERAs than Aaron Nola entering their starts. And they really got after it. And they were consistently applying pressure to Royals pitching, and it was nice to see, especially after what we had witnessed in Atlanta earlier in the week. And I guess when you step back and you look at everything that transpired over the previous 6 games, if I told you, look, the way that this team's playing right now, having to go down to Atlanta and then having to go out to Kansas City, you probably, and I hate that this is where the bar is at the moment, but it is where the bar is at the moment. You probably take a 3-3 road trip against those 2 teams in those 2 parks. I'm not ready to anoint them slam dunk NL champions. I'm not ready to say that they're back, but you said it. It was certainly a needed performance and an encouraging performance because, what we did see as well, we talked about a number of guys who have really been going through it. And there were some positives. You saw Bryson Stott swing the bat a little bit this weekend. You saw Brandon Marsh, who we had suggested on Friday may need a breather down in Lehigh, have probably his best series in 2.5 months, just in terms of the quality of at bat too. Even when he made outs, there was some competitiveness to the at bats. So I don't know what that means. I don't know what it looks like against Houston this week. Maybe we're right back to where we were last week when they couldn't hit against the Braves, and we're like, see, the inconsistency. But for a couple games here against a pretty good opponent on the road, in a situation where they really needed to stack a couple wins, a nice reprieve at bare minimum.
No question. And here's the thing, though, Bob. And it's so funny because I don't want to do like a giant pivot on you real quick. We could still talk about the offense here. But the thing that really stands out to me, and I think that I said this on Friday, but I'll reiterate here. The thing that I cling to and the thing that makes me feel better about the Phillies than I think a lot of people continues to be, except for one person who we're going to talk to, I'm sure, about today, the starting pitching. And that it continues to be something that you trust and you build off of that and grow out. So if your starting pitching is good, it allows your bullpen to rest. It makes your bullpen better. It also prevents your hitters from pressing, right? Feeling like they have to go out there and hit a home run to get back into a game. And they could be, the lineup can be a little bit more free and easy. I think it's a domino effect, right? Mm-hmm. And so to get Ranger Suarez back this weekend, even though he only threw 5 innings, but they were 5 really important innings. And if you recall, the offensive explosion for the weekend pretty much occurred after the Ranger Suarez 5 innings. That right. 5th inning where he gets out of it Saturday night, they're holding to a 2-1 lead. He's got 2 runners on base and 1 out, and he strikes out guys on back-to-back at bats, knowing he's at the end of his pitch limit and that these are his last 2 hitters that he's going to face in this game. I think that kind of is a catalyst for that offense. Like, okay, we have our guy back. And I think that matters to everybody, and in such a way that it can't really be quantified numerically or statistically. But when you think about it, knowing you have now 4 guys who could kind of fall into that same role, I think will make everything a lot easier on the offensive players.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, we talked about this starting rotation and what the pitching looks like, and it all sort of, I don't want to say it all rides on Ranger Suarez, but when you look beyond Nola Wheeler, it does get a little bit less certain. Christopher Sanchez has been up, he's been down, he's been up, he's been down. Getting Ranger Suarez back where you feel like, okay, now we can run out 4 deep, knowing that there's a pretty good chance that we're going to have the advantage. I mean, Ranger Suarez just lengthens everything. And he does. I think he brings a sense of confidence, a sense of calm. I think there is something to that. And I don't know that he's starting a game 3 in a playoff series. Maybe this is just another way to, maybe this is another arm, that swingman arm where maybe he starts a playoff game. Maybe he works 3 innings in relief in a key situation. But it's such a weapon. And I thought of nothing else. He gets through the start without any injury concerns. He looked like himself. And even if the results weren't there, the one thing I was looking for on Saturday night was, does this look like Ranger Suarez? And it did. And to check that box and then get the result on top of it was just so important. And the way that I sort of look at this team, it just feels a lot different when Ranger Suarez is in the mix. And of all the things that happened this weekend, the 34 hits in the last 2 days included, that was probably the most important thing for this team when you look ahead 6 weeks, 7 weeks out from now. So there's no question about that. I was also encouraged by what we saw from the bullpen, the main guys in the bullpen. They're starting now to look between the Atlanta series. I thought you started to see some glimpses of it, and then I think that they carried that momentum over into the Kansas City series. I feel like they're starting to get it back together. So when I look at the pitching, I'm in a much more comfortable space with the entire staff than I was maybe a week, 2 weeks ago. It's starting to feel like it's coming together a little bit. And I feel better about having said that after watching it in Kansas City, because that's a good offense that they were dealing with, a team that's really swung the bats well now for pretty much the bulk of the second half. And the main guys that you expect to produce in October, I thought did a nice job. Now, that being said, the one guy that did not produce on the mound this weekend, we need to talk about. And I'm just going to give you a tweet. I know that you wrote a story about it. I'm reduced to tweeting these days. But Friday night, I had a couple beers too, by the way. So I wanted to make sure I went out of my way.
It's always my favorite, Bob. Couple of beers in tweeting baseball.
I actually think I was fair about this. I think, especially for a couple beers in, I thought I picked up the old Twitter machine and did a nice job here. You know, I said, there's not a whole lot left to say that hasn't already been said about this guy. Can't keep putting him out there. It's a waste of everybody's time. And then I followed up and said, good guy, good teammate, but as an organization, you can't tell guys you're all in and do this every 5th game. It's just the unfortunate reality at this point. I guess, you know, I'll stand on that. I mean, I don't want to come across like a dick, but when you start him, you are wasting everyone's time. You're wasting the players' time. You're wasting the fans' time. He's not a major league pitcher. I don't know if he ever will be again. Maybe he will be. I'm not trying to shovel dirt on his career. I'm not trying to be, like I said, I'm not trying to be a jerk about this, but this guy's cooked here. It's not going to work here anymore. They cannot put Taijuan Walker back on a major league mound this season in a game of importance.
I will say, and it depends on when people are listening to this week, but we are recording early Monday morning. I would say that by the time someone hits play and gets to the 10-minute mark of this episode, that they might already know that Taijuan Walker is no longer on the Phillies roster.
Is that a report or is that speculation or informed speculation?
I'm going to say that this is informed speculation.
Mm-hmm.
And what I will say is I'm pretty confident that they are not, well, I'm pretty confident that he's not going to start again when his turn comes up on Thursday. The question is whether or not this DFA / potential outright release happens today, tomorrow, Wednesday. I got to think it's today. I got to think that it's happening on Monday because I don't think the Phillies want to go into this Houston series down a man in the bullpen. And I guess they could technically ship Colby Allard back and bring a reliever up and still manage the Taijuan Walker situation for another couple days if they want to. But then you got to call up a different starting pitcher for Thursday / Friday. Why go through that rigmarole?
Why go through that? And if you're going to just do this to the guy, do it, right?
Right,
like, why make him sit there and dress and sit in the clubhouse, sit in the dugout, and be like, oh, by the way, on Wednesday we're going to do this to you.
So the only reason that you would do that, Bob, and this is, I give the Phillies some credit here because this is what they do with guys, even guys that they're going to move on from, is they recognize that Walker's a veteran, right? They recognize that he's been in the league a long time. He as a veteran player has some options and some rights. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they basically said to him, listen, you're not starting again this year. You're not pitching in the major leagues again this year. But we've made this investment in you. Okay? We would be okay with you. We're going to put you on waivers. No one's going to claim you because of the contract, right? Right? So you could be designated for assignment. So nobody's going to claim you. And then you would have to accept an assignment to AAA. We're good with that because we feel like, we've made this investment in you. We want to, keep working with you and try and get you back to where you are. But we understand as a professional, if you don't want to accept that assignment, in which case you let us know. And then rather than go through that process, we'll just release you like they did with Whit Merrifield. Right. And so they probably agreed on some kind of time frame for him to make that decision. What that time frame is, I don't know, but it's probably something like, hey, Taijuan, talk to your agent and let us know.
Maybe you have that conversation today and it takes 48 hours to get to a conclusion. Sure.
Right.
And that's so, I know some people are like, you have to DFA this guy tonight. And I'm like, as in on Friday night, I'm like, well, you don't do that. Like, they're on the road. You're not going to send the guy out on a plane by himself. Like, see you later. There is some nuance to this. You get back to Philly, you get your thoughts together, you get your plan together, you have all the conversations you need to have. And so maybe it doesn't get to us until the middle of the week, but you have to think that there's no sense in messing around here and prolonging this. And I mean, you said it. In what world could you hand him a baseball and say, pretty important series against the Braves? I want to get to that again. Yet another opportunity to try to knock out the Braves. Can you do it, fellas? And you say, let's go get them. We're going to give you the ball for the first. I mean, there's no way. There's no way.
So they could, the way that the calendar works, they could technically pitch Ranger on Thursday. But I guess you're saying to yourself, are you okay with Ranger going on just regular rest after not pitching, for all that time? And you're giving every other starter an extra day. So technically Ranger could go Thursday. You don't really need this spot in the rotation till Friday. But I really don't know the way Colby Allard pitched yesterday, is it fair to Colby Allard to just say, you were up for one start, we're sending you back down, and you can't recall him because it's 15 days you have to be for pitchers, you have to be in the minors, so you have to call somebody else up to pitch that game against the Braves.
Right.
Who are you doing? You're going to call up Tyler Phillips again? I don't even know. I'd have to go back and look. I haven't yet. I'd have to go back and look to see what date he was actually sent down, because I don't know if that's 15 days since then either. You could always you got to make some other move.
Well, you're talking about not being overly. You don't want to be a prisoner of the moment and react to what you just saw. But Colby Allard, I'm gonna regret saying this, but Colby Allard's done a nice job. If the goal is to win games, and he might be his next start, he might absolutely blow up, and you might be like, dude, we can't do this anymore, right? That is absolutely possible. But I do think you're at the time of year where you're trying to win baseball games. And we've talked about this, going back to the game against the Nationals last weekend, not pinch hitting Bryce Harper and JT Realmuto. I want to get to JT Realmuto in a little bit and their decision not to play him yesterday. I think we're getting a little carried away with the Rob criticism again. I was very critical last Monday. You're going to get a different version of me today. So if you're here for the Rob Thompson bashing, you're not going to get it from me, everyone. So,
yeah.
With that being said, you have to convey a message of we are doing what we can to win games with what we have. And starting Taijuan Walker is just, it simply does not do that. It fails to do that. It fails to say we're in. We're trying here. You're no longer trying. You're trying to bleed out some money from a bad investment is what you're doing by putting him back out there. He's not going to figure it out. Even if he has a game where he goes out there for 5 innings and gives up 1 run, he's 1 start away from going 4 innings and giving up 5 runs. Like it's not going to happen. It's not a product of bad luck. His stuff isn't good. He's not able to locate consistently. He doesn't trust his best pitch. Like it just does not work. It's not going to work here. And maybe it works somewhere else. Maybe he sticks as a number 5 starter somewhere else and he figures it out. And I hope he does, but it's not going to be here and it can't be here. It cannot be here. And so as far as Allard goes, just based on merit, based on that he's been okay. He's been competitive. He's fought. He's made the most of what he has, something that Taijuan Walker has not. I feel like what message are you sending if you're like, yeah, thanks, man, but see you later? I mean, not for nothing. I looked it up because you mentioned it and you alluded to it on Friday. Like Phillies offense hasn't been that bad in August. The Phillies have the best batting average in the National League in the month of August. They're number 2 in Major League Baseball. I'll speak to that in a moment, though. They're number 2 in Major League Baseball behind only the Kansas City Royals. So for that guy to go out and give you 5 good innings against a lineup that's been that productive on the road in a game that decides whether or not you had just another horrible road trip or hey, you know what? All right. Like that game was big for feeling. I think you have to give him the ball again.
I mean, 23 batters faced, 18 guys, first pitch strikes. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Yeah. I mean, if you're trying to look at the difference between a guy like Taijuan Walker and a guy like Colby Allard, it's Colby Allard's not afraid to throw the ball over the plate.
Yeah, well, it's one thing to give up the hard contact that Taijuan Walker gives up and then, mix in 3 or 4 walks and good night.
For sure. And I think that's the difference. As I'm trying to mute so that you don't hear the sirens of the ambulance flying. Oh, that's a fire truck, actually. That was a fire truck. Yeah, no, I mean, that's really that's what you hear Rob Thompson talk about it all the time. And he says, hey, you got to throw strikes, man. You just got to go out there, throw strike 1. Strike 1 is for a starting pitcher. For any pitcher really, but really for a starting pitcher is the bread and butter. Like if you get strike 1 on a guy on that first pitch, your odds of getting the out increase significantly over being 1-0, right, in your count. So Colby Allard goes out there and he gets strike 1, and that's what he does. And yeah, is he going to give up some hard hit balls? He doesn't throw the ball hard. His is all about location and a pitch mix and everything else. But he's throwing 90, right?
I mean, what it comes down to, this is what you need from him. You need him to just give you a shot. Like you need him to give you what Taijuan Walker gave you last year, which is 5 innings, maybe 5 plus, anywhere between 2 and 4 earned run. Like just where every 5th game, you're like, all right, like obviously we don't feel awesome about what we're throwing out here, but we know that this guy's going to do enough to at least give our offense a puncher's chance. Not where a guy comes out and just deflates the balloon immediately, which is what Correct. You're getting out of Taijuan Walker. And listen, you go back to Friday night's game, if you really want to pick it apart, the offense had some opportunities early on. Trey Turner, double play in a big spot, was sort of a killer. And then Taijuan Walker unravels. Like, is that game any different if Turner delivers there? Maybe. I doubt it, though. Like, maybe it just turns into a straight up back and forth slugfest. I'm not sure. But, I mean, there's just no – that's enough. Like, I don't want to talk about this guy on this show anymore. And I know when I say that, and I even said it in the tweet, like this guy, there's nothing else to be said about this guy. I don't even mean that in a disrespectful way. It's just like, there's nothing left to say about this. They tried, they messed up. It was a bad contract. It didn't work out. It's okay. You just can't keep compounding mistake at this point.
No, I agree. And that's why I think that the move happens today. Because whatever it is, I think it happens today because the Phillies want to have a full bullpen for these two series at home against Houston and Atlanta. And so I think that the decision will come down today, and this is all we're going to be talking about how the Phillies are eating this money. Because that's really what's
let me just end on this note with the Taijuan Walker conversation. The follow-up tweet that I had was like, listen, good guy, good teammate. He's liked. It's not going to work. It's unfortunate. See you later. I got a lot of pushback about that, actually. People were like, oh, wait, good guy. Like, what are you talking about? He threw Rob Thompson on their bus last year, and he was tweeting pictures of his home gym 2 days after the playoffs ended. And, he's not a good guy. He's selfish. Well, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you and I both know, we've said it on the show, that he's well liked in the clubhouse and he works hard and he's not mailing it in. He's not dogging it. So let's get that out of the way. But do you want to speak to that at all beyond that?
I mean, I don't know. The way I look at it, Bob, is if people get upset about that, I mean, a guy's a competitor, right? He's pitching at the highest level of his craft. Right, you can't get any higher than Major League Baseball. So you are automatically, just in the fact that you make it to the majors, you are automatically in the top 1% of the top 1%, right? So you need a certain competitiveness to you to get to that point. And if you feel like you were spurned a little bit in the playoffs last year, and you're showing that you're in your home gym 2 days later, I think that's a sign that I'm getting after it. I think I'm going to prove them wrong. And that's your competitiveness coming out. Turns out he was wrong.
Yes.
Right. But I do not begrudge the guy one iota.
Nor do I. And maybe he didn't need to have public comments about his disappointment. I don't know that he was entirely based in reality. I agree. He's a competitor. He's a guy that's had success at the professional level. Not only is he a major league pitcher, but a guy that's done it for a long time, and he's had some success. And I do think that we're sort of skewing what really happened. Now, in real time last year, I said, this guy cannot be on a playoff roster. It was not like I was advocating for that, but the Taijuan Walker that everybody was disappointed by last year was far better than the Taijuan Walker that we have watched this season. I mean, he still made last year 31 starts. He had an ERA, I think, in the 4.3s, and he won 14 or 15 games. I mean, it's not like he was not what you thought you were getting, but he was not this guy that we've seen this season either.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. And he is, as someone who's talked to him on multiple occasions, he is a good guy. All right. He really is. I give him credit for standing there in the face of knowing he's getting one negative question after another and taking it. His answers may be kind of blah sometimes, and you might be like, all right, dude, you're not a 7-inning pitcher anymore. And you say you can be you're kind of blowing a little bit of smoke, but that's in his head. He thinks he can be that. And so he's going to say it. I give him credit for being accountable, standing up. I mean, he said in his last game, I know I'm a better pitcher than this, right? He feels that, and he is well liked in that clubhouse. He is part of that group, but it's gotten to the point where they gave him 13 starts, man. They gave you 13. And of the 13, did he give you, other than the only start that I even think back on and say was London, that he gave you a decent start.
Hey, all right.
Yeah, exactly. And other than that, the other 12 sucked.
All right,
let's be honest.
I certainly don't want to sit here and harp on the negative. I do have one other thing I wanted to quickly get to, and then maybe we can turn the page. Alec Boehm, in the midst of Saturday night's offensive outburst, was 0 for 5 and looked visibly frustrated. Now, look, I don't know exactly what was going on. If you just are reading the body language, he's on the bench. You got Bryce Harper next to him, which, by the way, all right, Bryce, look at you stepping in and trying to offer some words of encouragement. I like that. We don't see that all the time at least in the dugout, at least with a camera panning over and showing that to us.
Right.
So that's a good thing, I think. But you're Alec Boehm, you talk about guys being competitors and wanting to do well. were you like at all? What do you make of the body language and the fact that he just looked like he wanted to put his head through a wall after a bad night at the plate? Like, is that good? Does that show that he cares and that we should applaud that, or are you like at all sort of concerned that the guy was that upset about a hitless night at the plate? Like, how do you read into that?
I take it even further, Bob. I go into yesterday.
Well,
In the first
okay,
inning.
I should have maybe set it up differently, but yeah, I mean, he makes an out early. He's upset again. Then he forgets the outs in the bottom half. I mean, okay, so let's just package this all together then and have the conversation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and what ends up happening there is he has to go down, and this is what they do. Rob Thompson goes down in the tunnel with Bohm so that they're away from the cameras, so you don't see the conversation, for lack of a better term, between manager and player. But Rob was pretty adamant about it afterwards, and you don't usually hear Rob say these kinds of things about his players. But his quote after the game: "That was a mental mistake and it can't happen. We fixed it. I spoke with him after that happened. I just told him those things can't happen and you need to wake up or we're going to do something else." He cares about getting hits and helping the team, and he gets frustrated. You can't take your at-bats onto the field with you. When you're not hitting, you have to get lost in the team. You have to do whatever you can to help the team win, whether it's playing good defense, running the bases well, backing up bases. Just get lost in the team. That's as outwardly.
So it's not really necessarily about what you think. It's about what Rob Thompson thinks, which for Rob, that's about is like, yo, like let me translate that if I were the manager of the team. Yo, that's bullshit. That ain't happening again, or there's going to be a real big problem. Like that.
Yeah.
That's
yes. And so, I mean, for everybody who's like, oh, you need to bench a guy after that, Rob did everything but bench the guy. He did. He took him down in the tunnel, probably, berated the shit out of him in the tunnel as a manager to a player, then publicly tells everybody in the post game that this can't happen, and he had a conversation and it's fixed, right? So that kind of attitude will not be accepted in this organization, and Alec Bohm needs to know that, and he should know that by this point. Like, after everything he went through, with the I hate this place thing and everything else, like, he should really know better.
So is this a case of ultra competitiveness with a sprinkle of immaturity? Like, is that? Yeah, I mean, like, because on one hand, I'm like, all right, the guy wants to win. He's not producing at the moment. He's frustrated. That's cool. Like, we say, oh, we want to see the frustration. Same time, you don't want to see the frustration. Not to that degree, to the point where he's on the bench looking like he just found out that his dog died, and then the next day his head's not even in the game. Like, situationally, you're like, whoa, like, yeah, wear your heart on your sleeve and all, but come on. And so it was a little bit, like I said, it's a little bit of like a mixed bag as you parse through that. Now, credit to him. He gets it together and he ends up having a couple hits, comes through for them, helps them win a game. Like, all right, great. But I don't know. That was a very strong response for Rob, and good for Rob, because we've sat here and talked so much about, does this guy hold anyone accountable? Is he even awake? Sometimes, I'm not saying you and I are necessarily saying those things, but certainly a lot of people are. And then we have to react to it, and it becomes part of our discourse. So it's I think it was important that Rob actually came out after the game and let people know, hey, I addressed it. It wasn't as simple as, well, Alec's a professional and he wants to win.
Yeah.
He added on and kind of gave you, as a fan, some of those things that you probably wanted to hear after that.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was good. That was a good little thing, and I wanted to bring that up. I'm glad that you went to it, because I think it's important to identify that even in a game that the situation, it didn't hurt the Phillies because they got out of the inning right without giving up a run, and Bohm comes back and has a good game at the plate in the end. They win 11-3. Everything's hunky dory. I did think that was a teaching moment in a lot of ways, and the manager handled it the best way he possibly could handle it.
Yeah.
And I, we don't ever sit here and say the manager did something right. usually we're criticizing the manager, like, oh, question his decision making, or why didn't you go to this guy in this spot, or whatever. But when a manager does something right, it kind of just flies under the radar. I think it's worth pointing out that the manager handled this the best possible way he could.
Oh, perfect segue then, Anthony. Let's talk about yesterday's game and what happened behind the plate. JT Realmuto, 7 RBI night on Saturday, 2 3-run homers, adds another RBI late. He accumulated, as I tweeted out, 19.4% of his season total of runs batted in Saturday night's game. He's hot. And then the Phillies turn around and they don't play him in the finale on Sunday. And some people said, yo, Rob, you've got to read the room. How do you let a guy that's this hot sit on Sunday? Now, obviously, Garrett Stubbs goes out and he's on base 5 times and he goes 4 for 4. And that aside, because I don't think anybody was expecting that. Let's look at this decision with JT Realmuto. Now, I was on the other side last week in the Washington game. I took the side of the people saying, like, yo, you had a chance to sweep. This game's kind of important. Could we maybe rev these guys up for a pinch hitting situation? Like, is that so unreasonable? That's debatable. I still think I was right. I still think the people were actually right for a change. I think that was one situation where it was just beyond, like, I get the big picture. It's like, come on, man. This criticism about not playing Realmuto yesterday is insane to me. Like, I don't know if this is just a few people on Twitter and the algorithm gave it to me. But then, you sniff around some of the post-game talk and radio, TV, and, like, it was a topic of conversation. This is a guy that is 33 years old who had a knee surgery this year. It was a day game after a night game. You have the Astros and the Braves this week with no days off. There is no better time than yesterday to give him the day off. He needs a day off. This was easy. There's nothing to debate. It does not matter what he did at the plate the night before. It doesn't. This is simple.
And it only goes to show the narrow focus that some people have on baseball.
It's not the NFL. It's not the NFL. And I don't know what JT Realmuto is going to do this week. Maybe he goes 0 for 19 during this homestand. That's very possible. But are you enjoying JT Realmuto's 939 OPS over the last 15 games? Is that something that you're interested in? Then the best thing for you to do is probably let the guy rest a day game after a night game, and let's see if he can carry that forward. If you burn him out and you beat the shit out of him, he's going to wear out. There's no doubt about it. Like,
correct.
This wasn't a pinch hitting situation in the 9th inning with a tying run at the plate. This is a day off for an aging catcher who has struggled for extensive periods of time this season. And just because you wanted to see if he could hit another home run on Sunday doesn't mean that it was the right thing to do.
Well, my question comes to this, Bob. They're in the midst of playing 15 consecutive days, or 13 consecutive days, whatever it is. If not yesterday, when's the day off? When are you comfortable?
Yeah, you want to sit the opener against the Astros?
For all the people who were uncomfortable, who wanted to play him yesterday, when are you giving him off?
Yeah.
What's the day off for the catcher? Like, when does a catcher ever play more? Like, the most games in a row that this guy ever plays is 5, and he just played 5 straight games. You've got to play the backup catcher once a week. And it was yesterday was the day. Like, what? It doesn't make it blows my mind that there are people out there, and it's not just fans, Bob. It's not just fans, although this guy is a fan, but the new host at 97.5, Bill Colarulo, he puts it out on Twitter yesterday, like he's utterly perplexed by this decision, and then doubled down on it after Stubbs had 4 hits and said it was still wrong. And it's sitting there like, are you serious right now? I mean, you've got to.
I will always have a feeling in the moment before it happens, and I'll say, I don't agree with this. I did not suddenly agree with it because Garrett Stubbs had the game of his life yesterday. It did not impact the way that I felt about the decision to sit him. I thought it was the correct one. You know what I didn't love? And it worked out because they ran away late on Saturday night. But I texted you. I texted you and Tim Kelly about it. said, yo, 5-1 Saturday night. You lost 2 straight games. You're 1-3 on this road trip, and you're giving me Jose Ruiz. And I know you said, oh, it's not high leverage. I'm like, you don't get the right inning. It could turn into it pretty quickly. Like, I thought that they should have been more in a sellout mode on Saturday night with their bullpen. And it worked out. I guess I was wrong. They didn't need to do that. But I really did feel like, hey, like, if you want to be honest, like, if we're like for full transparency here, I'm sitting here telling people that they're nuts for questioning Rob yesterday. Like, that was a situation where I guess I was wrong because they won the game comfortably and they didn't need to sell out to that degree. But in that moment, I'm like, and, you cited Jose Ruiz has been really good lately. I'm like, yeah, all right. Like, his last 9 appearances, they've won 2 of them. And the other 2 games that he had appeared in that they had won by 4+. Like, I don't know. Like, I'm not ready for Jose Ruiz in tight games that are important. Like, I'm just not.
Yeah, and the thing of it is I guess the way that they use him, Bob, is he usually comes in when they're trailing. Like, they like to use Strahm and Hoffman in spots when they're either tied or ahead.
Sure.
And that Ruiz and Kerkering tend to be guys that they turn to when it's down a run or 2.
Feels like
right?
Kerkering's getting it together a little bit, doesn't he?
A little bit, yeah, it does.
It
does. And so I think when you sit there and say, well, they've lost 7 of the 9 games he's pitched in, well, it's because he usually comes in when they're behind.
That's exactly my point, though. It's like he usually comes in when they're behind. Like, I just felt like Saturday night, I'm like, you better win this game. Like, you better not get cute. You better win this game. You cannot get swept in Kansas City this weekend. You just can't. That was where I was coming from in that moment. I'll tell you what, as frustrating as it was on Friday to wake up and be like, oh, Phillies, 2 out of 3 in Atlanta again. They can't beat this team. They're messing around. They're going to leave the door open. Atlanta didn't do anything wrong this weekend. They won a series against the Nationals, and Atlanta's not a world beater 100-win team, so you can't expect them to be sweeping everybody. But, like, this was a weekend. If you were a Braves fan going into the weekend, you're like, all right, the Phillies are playing like total shit. They're going to Kansas City, who's red hot. That's going to be a problem for them. They're probably not going to win that series. We have a chance to win a series against a bad team at home, maybe even sweep one. We might pick up another game. We might pick up another 2 games. You're thinking there's a world where you get to this week and it's a 3 or a 4 game lead at the beginning of the week before they even get to that series. Instead, they don't gain any ground. They're lucky they won Friday night. CJ Abrams gifted them a game. They lose 5-1 yesterday, totally listless. Now they got to go out to Minnesota. Like, if you're a Braves fan, you're like, damn, dude, like, we had an opportunity here and we missed it.
So we went from Friday where, like, this could get really hairy in the next week for the Phillies, to now you look at it and say, Bob, if you want to take an optimistic spin, they could bury this division this week.
They could.
Like, in all honesty, we got because the Braves have to play 3 in Minnesota before they play 4 here. If you look at it the other way, you can look at it and say the division race could be over by the time we recorded this show next week.
We'll see. They've got some work to do, the Phillies, this week. Number one, you've got to beat the Braves. Like, I know they beat them in the playoffs and they have the upper hand, and I get all of that. I'm not going to sit here and say that the Phillies have to prove something necessarily against the Braves, but, like, they have lost all 3 series to this team this season. They did miss an opportunity this past week. And while the Braves have to deal with Minnesota on the road, which I acknowledge is not an easy setup, and the Phillies are at home, like, the Astros have played pretty good baseball here recently. Like, they really have. And so, the Phillies have to come back home and kind of continue to elevate their game. Like, and they have not done that for extended stretches in 2 months. Like, so now you've got to piggyback a nice series win and come home and kind of keep your foot on the gas. Now, they're a pretty big favorite tonight. They get Wheeler on the mound. They've got Blanco listed for the Astros. And they're minus 166 favorites. So the Phillies are a strong favorite. Like, I'm not saying you sweep the Astros. I don't think that they will, but, like, you've got to find a way to win a series here going into this Atlanta series. And then, it's time. I'm not saying you've got to sweep them out of the building 4 games. It's a 4-game series, right?
Correct.
Win the series and end this. Just at least end this part of it, because I do think you're going to have to jockey with Milwaukee and the Dodgers down the stretch. And in fact, looking at the Dodgers schedule, pitching problems aside, I'm starting to become pretty pessimistic about the Phillies being a 1 seed. I don't even think that's all that important. But like you got to get one of these top 2 seeds.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of looked at it and we discussed this. We didn't talk about this on the show, but the way it's playing out now, the wild card race is really only going to be between really the Braves and the Mets. I mean, maybe somebody else jumps up and gets into that.
That was a tough loss for the Mets yesterday. Like,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but just real quick on the Mets. Like, I credit them, and Lindor has been so good. I give them a lot of credit for their season looked beat in London. Like, just dunzo. They're in it. Fans are watching the scoreboard. They could make the playoffs. It's just like they too, similar to what we just talked about with the Braves. It's like every time they have a chance to really make a jump, they just can't do it. Like they just can't get over that next hurdle. You're up 2-0 in the 8th yesterday against the Padres and you lose. And that's the difference between winning a series and losing a series. Like, that's a killer for them.
Yeah. Well, you also shouldn't be throwing the ball around like they did over the weekend.
Yeah.
You know, where left field makes 2 errors, right, on the same play, and you know, pitchers throwing the ball over the play. It was just it was a total mess. But the point being, what you were just saying, you're watching the way that the Diamondbacks and the Padres have been playing. They're going to be the top 2 wild cards, right? They're technically still in the race with the Dodgers. I mean, Diamondbacks, I think, are 3 games out of first, right? I mean, so you look at that and you say, would you rather be the number 1 seed and have to play the winner of a Diamondbacks Padres series in a shortened 5-gamer, or would you rather play Milwaukee, Atlanta, Mets? Like, the 2 seed is looking a lot more appealing if you're the Phillies than the 1 seed is. Just saying.
Of those 3 teams, if the 2 seed, I think the 2 seed is the likely reality, unless the Dodgers say, yeah, we want no part of that, and they start taking their foot off the gas to try to make it not a reality.
Yeah.
So, like, I think the Mets are the team you'd love to see, right? Because, like, they are clearly the of those 3 teams, I think the weakest.
Well, weakest pitching for sure.
For sure. That said, I feel like there's an immense amount of pressure to beat them. Like, they don't hit at Citi Field. Like, the Phillies don't. Like, the Mets, it's like all or nothing, David Goliath almost. Like, I don't love that. I don't love that setup. The Braves, it's like, how many times can you – I think the Braves stink, and that's why I was very frustrated last week in Atlanta. Like, come on, guys. This team, given all of the injuries, like, they're professionals, and they've got a couple good arms. Like, Lopez has been good, and Sale's been good, and that's fine. But, like, come on. I just don't know how many times you can take them down. But then Milwaukee scares me because, you know, bullpen's it's tough. It's a tough road. It's a tough road. There's no team that you're like, there's no Marlins waiting for you at home in the first round. That, you know.
Well, you're trying to avoid the first round, right?
Yeah,
We're talking about avoiding the first round.
Yeah.
And so, you know, look, there's no lock into the 2 seed. Milwaukee's only a game behind the Phillies, right? So we've had that discussion too. But if you're looking at being in the top part of the bracket, I don't know.
You'd rather have that path. You'd rather have
let the Western Division teams beat the hell out of each other.
Yeah.
Right. And then you only have to face one of them, and you handle the teams in your division and Milwaukee. I think I'd much rather that path.
And maybe it's because they won the World Series in 2008 and they were on the road a lot, and you know, being on the road the past 2 postseasons has not been a detriment to them. But like in a 7-game series, especially, I don't mind not having home field advantage to start a series. I really don't. Yeah. Like I think if you can, and they've been very good at getting one of the first 2. If you win one of those first 2 on the road, I think you have the advantage as the road team in the 7-game series. I kind of just do. So I don't really care about not having home field advantage against the Dodgers potentially in an NLCS. But it's so important to just get one of the 2. You know, I really do. I really do. All right. Wow, we're 45 minutes in. I feel like we haven't even gotten to some stuff here, but is there anything else from over the weekend or that we haven't talked about since Friday that you feel like is very important? I'm not ready to be like, yay, Brandon Marsh is back. Bryson Stott is back. As I mentioned earlier, I was encouraged by what we saw from those guys this weekend. I mean, that's so important. I know that you were very excited about Johan Rojas's 2 hits yesterday. Squared up both of those balls, hit it on the screws, as he often does.
Man. Yeah, no, we didn't even really talk about. We talked about the decision not to play Real Muto, but we didn't talk about Real Muto himself.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously that's a monster game on Saturday night.
It's been really good the last 15 games, man.
Well, that's the thing, and I think that this is where we kind of like went off onto a slightly different path on the conversation, but because we were talking about giving him a day off. But it's not like JT Realmuto just started hitting Saturday night. Like, he's been hitting for a while now, and that makes the lineup so much longer when he's going well, because that's really been a thing. I mean, I'm sure you have the exact numbers. I didn't pull up the exact numbers, but it's been for more than just Saturday night. It's been for 2 weeks this guy's been hitting, and you might not have noticed it so much because they were losing some games in there, and a 1 for 3 in a night that you lose a game doesn't really stand out, but don't forget that's a 333 batting average in that game, right? So there's a lot of that with JT Realmuto of late, and if he's going well and the other guys can just be functional, man, that make the lineup that much longer.
And that's what's amazing. If you go back to March and you think about this lineup, you're like, damn, it's so long, and every out's going to be tough. And if you're a pitcher, you don't get a chance to collect your breath until you get to the 9 hole. And for the last, and look, I mentioned the batting average. A lot of that is certainly on the strength of the last 2 days. You put together 34 hits over 2 games, and that's going to do wonders for your batting average. But like you look at the slugging. I think they're 11th in the month of August in slugging, and they're 22nd in home runs. And that's the difference. Like, that's why I'm not like, wow, this offense, like where is the ability to drive the baseball?
Yeah.
Like, and that's the one part of this that's missing. But I will take good approaches, good at bats, good fight, going the other way, using all fields like that. That's fine. If you're not going to be the team that leads Major League Baseball in home runs, then you got to do that. It just has not felt like a long lineup. In fact, it's felt like a lineup with just hole after hole after hole. And you stop and you wonder, like, how do we get here? Like, how do we get here? And that is where the Stotts and the Marshes come into play. And when Turner is either all in for a week or just a total 0 for a week, like, that becomes very frustrating. Bryce Harper had, I believe, 4 hits this weekend. I don't feel like I'm watching Bryce Harper still. Like,
no,
it's just not. That's not Bryce Harper, missing pitch after pitch after pitch that he could do damage with. And you see him getting visibly frustrated in the middle of his at-bat, just knowing, like, holy, these are pitches that I typically crank, and he's just not doing it right now. Still a lot of strikeouts, not walking a lot. Like, that's the, I hate oversimplifying. I really do, but you feel like that's the missing piece. That guy gets his stuff together. Oh my God.
Yeah, it changes everything if Harper becomes Harper. It's so funny that you wanted to put because I had mentioned it on Friday, and then of course they go out and have a big weekend where they go 45 for 121. They hit 372 in Kansas City for the weekend as a team, and they now have the best batting average in the National League. I think you said second best in baseball in the month of August, but it is just batting average. It is not it's not the slug, because the home runs are just not there. For the entire week, Monday to the road trip, the only home runs they hit were the 2 by Real Muto on Saturday and the 1 by Castellanos that didn't really matter at the end of the game.
And it's weird for a team that's like built to slug. Like, go back to the Howard Eskin Rob Thompson exchange from, I guess it was at late April or early May, where it's like, we're going to slug. And they've had periods where they've done that, but you're like, this team with all these guys that they have in the lineup that you feel like can burn you at any time, that has not been there. It's very strange to watch that kind of, and I don't know what to make of that or why that's happened. I mean, obviously, you and I, after the show on Friday, we were talking about the Gelb piece, a lot more off speed pitches. Pitchers have adjusted to the Phillies. They're aware of it. They're trying to work through it. Maybe they found something this weekend. Maybe they didn't, but they are a team that's got to, because look, here's the issue. As good as we all feel right now about what we watched the last 2 days, like, they are a team that is going to always have a boom or bust component. I think it's more likely that the Phillies find their slug and bash teams over the head for an extended run than it is that the Phillies are going to be a 13 hits a night team and tons of singles and playing situational baseball and moving runner. Like, I just don't think that the Phillies can sustain that. So they've got to find that slug gear at some point.
But it's nice to know that they can do it.
It's nice to know that they can do it, but at some point, I think you got to be
be who you are
supposed to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Be who you are.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
Exactly right. It's exactly
all right. Well, I guess great. So what do you got?
Well, I'm just going to, before I get to one last thing, I just want to know if you want to look at the 3 pitching matchups. I know you mentioned Wheeler and Blanco for tonight. Phillies favored in that one.
Did
probably
they say Verlander was going to throw on the telecast yesterday?
They did, but Verlander's scheduled to go tomorrow against Nola.
Okay.
So I'm curious to see. Maybe the Astros changed things up, and we just it hasn't been updated on MLB. MLB is usually really good at updating those pitching matchups.
I'll tell you what. Who's even better than MLB? DraftKings and FanDuel. So
yeah.
I think you can lock that in.
Yeah, I think it's going to be Blanco too. And then Spencer Arrighetti against Christopher Sanchez on Wednesday, and I think that's an advantage for the Phillies as well. So, you definitely have an advantage in 2 of the 3, and the one that you don't is a pretty heavyweight matchup in Verlander and Nola. I look at this series, Bob, and I say, even as well as the Astros have played, if you're starting pitching, I'm going to sound like a broken record for the rest of the year. If your starting pitching gives you what they should give you, you should win the series. And I look at it that way, and I say, if the Phillies get the starting pitching from Wheeler, Nola, Sanchez that they've been getting the last 2 times through, they win this series 2 out of 3.
So is the acceptable outcome here a 4-3 homestand? Like, if it's 4-3 on next Monday, we're like, all right. Like, again, not great, but they had a winning homestand. Okay, fine.
If you go 4-3, you probably build your lead back up to 8 games in this division.
If you go 5-2, you feel really good about it. And this is what's interesting. And the reason why I bring this up is because you go, okay, you get 2 out of 3 against the Astros. And if you were to beat the Braves 3 out of 4 and you go 5-2, you clear the month of August, essentially, for everything that has felt like it has gone wrong for so long for this team. You enter September probably with a commanding lead in your division. You probably are still one of 2 teams that have a bye going into the month of September, and you say, all right, guys, it's time now. Like, this is what you've been saying. This is what you said even up to a week ago when you were losing in Atlanta, that it's about getting into the playoffs. It's about this time of year. Let's go. And so it's a really important week, because on the other hand, if they have a 3-4 homestand or a 2-5 homestand, I think you enter September going, man, like, this is a problem. I really do. We could have this. We could do this every time we have a show. This is an important week. It's an important week. It's a statement week. This feels a little different to me because of who you're playing. And by the way, there's some history here recently with the Astros.
Yeah.
Lest we not forget.
First time they're back since the World Series.
So I think that there's a lot to be gained or lost this week, not just in the standings, but just in terms of the overall feel. One of the things that's been disappointing is the way that the fans have consumed this team this season, because it felt like, Phillies fans are great. They traveled there in Kansas City. Like, we know they're going to show up. They're going to sell out. That's great. But it sucks that for the last 2 months, they're like, this team's, what are these guys doing? That's been the feeling around this team. Whereas the first couple months, it was like, we're coming for it. Like, nobody does this better than Philadelphia. When things are going well, the chests are out. We're going to maul everybody to death. And then when what has happened, it's
I don't know. But I think it'll be
AGL,
No, I think it'll be great crowds down there this week. I think they'll sell out all 7 games.
I'd like to see the fans get that feeling back there this week, where you walk in there and like they know it's important too. The Phillies have to ultimately be the team that knows it's important, but I'd like to bring back the V word, the vibe. Like, you'd like to see the vibe this weekend. Be like, all right, let's LFG now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you're going to see it. I think you're going to see it this week. I got it. My prediction from 2 weeks ago is it's in jeopardy, but it still can happen. Remember when I stuck my neck out and said they would go 12-6 in the last 18 games of August. They're 7-5 so far. So I'm probably going to be off, but I'm not ready.
5-1 homes.
I need well. So I didn't count the last game of September, right? Which against the Braves on Sunday.
Got it.
So I need them to go 5-1 in the next 6 to hit that number. So I might be off by 1. Might end up being 11-7. But I think we'll still take it if they go 4-2 going into the final Sunday Night Baseball against the Braves. I
like the fact, by the way, like this is so stupid because this is like an NFL thing, but I like the fact that they didn't get swept by the Orioles this weekend, the Astros. Like I don't need them all pissed off and totally angry coming in here. Like that's fine. Little East Coast,
exactly.
You guys don't need to win these series. Exactly. All right. I talk about a team that's kind of on an island. Like I know the Mariners, I think, won 2 out of 3 this weekend. They just fired their manager. Like they're a game over 500. Like that team, man. That team missed its shot
completely.
What the hell's going on with Rodriguez? Can you imagine if that was a guy, like if this was the Phillies, he was on the Phillies? What would the conversation about that guy be here?
I know. It'd be something else. I don't know if he'd survive here. Fans would be all over him every day.
Disappointing.
We'd have to come up with some kind of like crazy ass defense for him on the show every day. Thankfully, we don't have to do that. All right. So one last thing. Baseball history happening tonight, Bob.
I knew this was what we were going to talk about.
I just think it's fun. It's fun.
Yeah,
it's a great little thing. It's a goofy thing that can only happen in this sport, but I think it's fun. Danny Jansen is going to be the first player in the history of baseball to play for 2 teams in the same game. Now, in case anybody is not aware of it, in case we have listeners who don't follow around what's going on around the league, a very brief summary is the Blue Jays and Red Sox played a game back in June that got rained out in the second inning. Not rained out, but it got suspended in the second inning, and they are concluding it today. Danny Jansen was the starting catcher for the Blue Jays in that game. As a matter of fact, was up to bat when the game got rained out.
So he's going to be catching his own at bat. Is that right?
Yes. So he got sort of. It would have been one more pitch. It would have absolutely been that. But he got since then has been traded from the Blue Jays to the Red Sox and is now subbing into the game for the Red Sox tonight. And will now play for both teams in the same game. First time it's ever happened. The interesting thing is if he would have seen one more pitch in that at bat that got when the game got washed, he would have had an official at bat. Like he would have been the official person batting. So whoever's batting for him in the first at bat of the game tonight will actually have the at bat. So Jansen cannot catch his own at bat. Unfortunately, but he can catch an at bat that he started that was originally his. So this will be the first time it's ever happened. Bob, I just think it's one of those weird statistical anomalies in sports, but it's something that you can always talk about, that here's a guy that played for both teams in the same game.
Yeah, it's like when you have the like the lunar eclipses and like, this is the first time this happens once every 87 years. Like this has never happened. Where are you going to be at 2:05 this afternoon? Will time stand still? Will you be watching this unfold?
I even forgot I forgot it's an afternoon game.
I believe it is. Yeah, it says we'll resume at 2:05 Eastern time. So
there we go. I didn't realize it was. I thought it was tonight.
Beautiful.
So I will not be tuned in at 2:05 this afternoon. I promise you that. But I just think it's a neat little thing, and for all the stuff that we talk about in baseball, and there's goofy things that happen all the time. This is part of what makes the game so fun, is that something stupid like this happens all the time, and you're like, man, that's never happened before, or that hasn't happened in 100 years, or whatever it might be. And it's just like, you don't think like that is something you're even thinking about when you walk into the ballpark, and yet there are going to be people at that ball game today are going to be like, oh yeah, I was there for that.
There's going to be a lot of bets on Danny Jansen props today. I think is a pretty safe bet.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The Danny Jansen prop market's going to explode.
So what happens? Let me ask this question, Mr. Gambling. Let's say you had a prop for Danny Jansen on June 26th in that game.
Yes.
When he was a member of the Blue Jays.
Yes.
Does that bet still count today as a member of the Red Sox?
I would say no, it does not. I would say, in terms of like how they handle that, it's sort of like a house rules thing, but a lot of times like suspended games will void bets. Sometimes they won't though. Like, I mean, I've actually seen it both ways. Like the book actually, I mean, they have extensive rules. Some will just like honor it and like let it sit there in the account. But if you're a bettor, you're like, yeah, what the hell? I don't want to have my money tied up in this bet for 2 months. Like, you know, so a lot of times it just nulls. So,
all right,
there you go.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
So,
all right,
there you go. That was our one last thing today.
For Anthony Sanfilippo, I am Bob Wankel. We will be back later this week somewhere talking to you. I don't know. I got some things to figure out. We'll figure that out.
I will tell people what it is later this week. I promise you that there will be some news later this week for sure.
I've had a couple. Yeah. I'm sure the same way with you. I've had a couple people DM me. I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I'll let you know. All right. Well, we'll talk to you later this week. See you later.